And welcome, after a long absence, the Beatlemaniacs are here. All three of us, Seth Lerman, Dave Viger, and me, Leonard Kaplan. Missing in action is Phil Weinstein, and he'll be back with us sooner or later. But the three of us have a lot to talk about because what we all have in common is we've all been to the recent Paul McCartney tour. So let's get into talking about that before we do anything else. Who wants to get going with that?
I'll start it off. I actually got to see Paul twice, a week apart. I saw him in North Carolina, in Winston-Salem with my daughter. And I missed the first 6 or 7 songs. I could hear them, but traffic was so bad. Once we got towards the arena, we could see the arena. We were about 6 blocks from it, 8 blocks, something like that, but we could not get off the road or get to the arena. We finally made it. But I saw what I consider the highlights, which everybody's probably seen already, is the Something tribute to George with the film behind.
Yeah.
And the John Lennon, Paul McCartney duet of I've Got a Feeling. But it was a great show. We had fantastic seats. And a week later, I saw him here in Orlando. I think it was the 28th. And I went with a buddy of mine. I think I said March. It was May 21st, May 28th. And that was equally as fantastic. I was able to see the whole show from beginning to end that day. Orlando had much better traffic routes than Winston-Salem. But it was a fantastic show. It was the 3rd and 4th time I saw McCartney. And I can't say I was disappointed in the least, but I loved every minute of it. He sounded great. He looked great. The band was on fire. And I liked the song selection. I can't think of any song that I wish he did that he didn't do. I mean, there's such a large body of work to choose from. I would have liked to hear that Fireman song, Sing the Changes. I've always been a big fan of that one since I saw him perform it on I think it was the David Letterman show, if I'm not mistaken. They did the Ed Sullivan Theater on the roof. And that was a lot of fun when I saw that. It was on TV, of course, but I loved it. I was just thrilled to be able to see him again. And I didn't think that was going to happen. So I was quite impressed.
So, Seth, what did your daughter think of it? Because you said it was her first time.
First time seeing a Beatle, although she did meet Pete Best when she was about 6 years old. But she loved it. I mean, she's been a Beatles fan her whole life. She inherited that love of the Beatles from her father. And it was, she loved every minute of it. It was just really good. And the Orlando show, I went with a friend of mine. It was his first time seeing McCartney as well. And he was quite, you could see on the faces that they can't believe they're actually looking at Paul McCartney in person, standing there singing Love Me Do and Can't Buy Me Love and Let It Be and Hey Jude. And I didn't tell either one of them about the John Lennon, Paul McCartney duet. I just made sure they were both paying attention at that moment of the song where the screen popped up behind the stage and there's John Lennon singing.
So you were with your daughter and her friend, or
I was with my daughter the first show and a friend of mine the second one.
I see.
Yeah, and some of the listeners might know Evil Dick from the Big Brother show went with me to the second show, and he never saw McCartney before. He was quite impressed, and my daughter was just. At one point, I think she had a tear in her eye, and during the George something tribute. That was really nice. It was really nice. And it's funny because I've seen other videos in different cities of Paul playing each of those 2 songs. And it's almost word for word that he tells the story about the ukulele.
Mm-hmm.
About you go around to George's house, ukuleles would come out. And I told George I'd play one of his songs on a ukulele. I'll play it for you tonight. Oh, he gave me this ukulele, by the way. He said it in every video I've seen him in the Winston. I saw him live twice, and then I saw him, I think it was New Orleans. He just said the same thing. I think Fenway, he said the same thing. I think I saw a show from another city, not Citi Field, but it might have been one of New York shows. He's always given the same speech talking about the George song. And it was great seeing the video behind this. I'm really glad that he incorporated the other Beatles into the show. I thought that was fantastic. The other times I saw him, he played some Beatles songs, but he really didn't acknowledge their time together like he did this past tour. And for me, that was something different and something that I found to be profound and very, very enlightening, very heartbreaking too as well, because you look at the screen and there's John and he's not there. but they did it. It sounded good. I thought it sounded fantastic when it came over loud and clear. And there's John Lennon singing with Paul McCartney on stage. And that's as close as I'll ever come to seeing the two of them perform together. So for that, I'm grateful. And I'm glad I got to see him. And I'm equally thrilled I got to see him twice this time around.
That's great. So
Yeah.
Dave, now you and Seth have something in common. You both saw Paul twice.
There you go.
I only saw him once. Dave, now you mentioned to me that Paul's set on the second night in Boston was slightly different. So what was it that was different, and why do you think he made those decisions?
I thought it was because Boston's special. No, no, but it really, excuse me, it made me feel like that, having two shows back to back. So the first change was on the first night. I believe he played I've Just Seen a Face acoustically.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And then the next night, it was We Can Work It Out. And then he threw Jet in there as well on the second night, which, I think he's played that every tour, pretty much since the beginning. But so, yeah, he changed it up a little bit. And I, too, went with two friends that had never been. And, Seth, you mentioned hearing the same story all the time. And I believe it was my 10th and 11th time seeing Paul, these last two shows. And, it made me think, sometimes you hear the same story, but there's so many people that are, seeing him for the first time. So I, looked at it from a different perspective. I thought he sounded great. I thought the atmosphere was great at Fenway. And, I really appreciate seeing McCartney. And, when it gets to the end of the show, I always have in the back of my mind, this could be the last time. And this time specifically, I think, I was trying to do Live and Let Die. I thought the pyrotechnics show was unbelievable. I think they stepped it up from, previous shows. I was trying to do that on Facebook Live, which wouldn't have given it justice anyway. And I couldn't connect. And at that point, I just said, you know what, I'm putting my phone away and I'm going to enjoy the rest of the show because, it could be the last show. So it was really good. And I thought he sounded better than I expected. I thought he sounded really good.
Well, I wanted to find out really what people were talking about when they were saying that his voice had declined. And of course, he's 80 years old. We saw him as 79-year-old.
Right.
But he turned 80 soon after we left him. But I was watching very carefully, not to nitpick or anything like that. But I was very pleasantly surprised and shocked that, his voice is pretty much intact, except at certain moments. It kind of came and went at certain times. And when he had backup musicians with him, he was fine. His falsetto is great. The only weakness that I really saw was when he did Blackbird, because it was just him and the guitar. And that's a hard song to sing and play at the same time. And I'm sure he had no problem playing at the same time. But, he's 80 years old, 79, 80 years old. And, he's living history, really, and people who say that he should retire and, what does he think he's doing? You get all kinds of comments on some of the videos that you have on YouTube. And it's just naysayers, let him enjoy performing. Let other people enjoy him. If you have something like that to say, just don't comment on those songs, But it was just a great time. It was a historical time, like you were saying, Seth, about, it was the first time he had mentioned George and John so much during the show. I liked the storytelling aspect of how the songs were written, like In Spite of All the Danger and things like that. It's interesting, to fans. Most of the fans, I would dare say, who went to those concerts are like us, they could all be doing their own podcasts And I'm sure, a lot of them know a lot of stuff that we don't know, and we know stuff they don't know. It's just, it's a fun kind of an informal club, And I just want to talk about Fenway for a second, the venue. Now, I know a little bit about audio. I thought the sound was fine. I didn't have any problem with it. The only problem I had nothing to do with Paul or the music. It was the location of the snack places. Only behind home plate could you get something other than a pizza or a hot dog, So, and it took so long. I was afraid I was going to miss the beginning of the show. And it was just I had my mask on, my COVID mask except when I was eating, because that's too much of a, and I remember I said to you, Dave, let's try to meet during the show.
Yeah.
That was like, that so unfeasible to try to find somebody.
I knew walking in, it was probably going to be unfeasible. It was pretty jam packed and people wall to wall, and
it would have been nice. It would have been fun to do a little segment there, but you just kind of relax and put the phone away. Put that phone away. No, go ahead.
They were meeting today. Today's Ringo Starr's birthday, 82. So happy birthday, Ringo.
Yeah,
Peace and love, or whatever. He wanted us to all chant at noontime. I missed that. I was in a meeting.
Now, also that Ringo toured Boston approximately the same time as Paul, and no one mentioned it, but I think people kind of had one eye off stage. Maybe Ringo could have showed up. That would have been something.
Yeah, I got to see Ringo back in June in Guilford, New Hampshire, and I thought the show was great. He had Colin Hay, Edgar Winter, Hamish Stewart, who toured with McCartney back in 89, 90, in 93, I think also. The lead guitarist from Toto, Steve, I don't remember his last name, but it's a really great show. Really well done. And I had looked at dates previous to that to see, number one, if it could happen in Boston. I think the only time it could have happened was possibly New Jersey, which, I wasn't going to that show, so I never gave it a second thought after that. But I knew Ringo would be in New Hampshire, and then I think he was in Boston first and then New Hampshire. And then the following, because I went on a Saturday night in New Hampshire, the following Tuesday and Wednesday, he was at Fenway. But for whatever reason, it wouldn't have worked out with the shows that they had scheduled.
So I think we all Paul McCartney concerted out, or should we go on to another topic?
I'm ready for another one.
All right. I have one. So I was watching some Beatle-related YouTube videos, and there was one that talked about the various solo careers of each Beatle. And what I want to know from you guys, what is your favorite post-Beatles album or song, and why? So I'll start with myself, I guess. I really like John Lennon's Walls and Bridges album. It's one of my favorite post-Beatles albums. It's got number 9 Dream on it. It's got Whatever Gets You Through the Night with Elton John on it. And it's just a very original piece of creation. And he produced it himself, which was very impressive. And he picked up a lot from George Martin, I think. And that album actually surprised me, Walls and Bridges. At the time he had made that album, he had separated from Yoko in his famous Lost Weekend phase with May Pang, his former assistant. Yoko somehow wangled it so that they could get together very unconventionally. And I think that, I don't know, there were rumors that Paul was we talked about this a little bit on our podcast. Paul wanted John to come down to New Orleans and and help with Venus and Mars, which would have changed musical history, I think, especially for that specific album. And there's just a lot going on. You had musicians like Jesse Ed Davis on there, and Jim Keltner, and I think Klaus Voormann was on there.
Mhm.
It's just a very that's one of my favorite. My other favorite, of course, is All Things Must Pass, which was pretty much George's all his saved up music from the 60s that he just kind of spewed into that album. Phil Spector produced that album for George. Not sure that was a great choice. A little bit too much of his echo there. And to compare Walls and Bridges with All Things Must Pass, I think production-wise, Walls and Bridges was done more expertly, I think, than Phil Spector's. So in my opinion, in that case, John Lennon was a better producer for George than Phil Spector was for himself than Phil Spector was for George. So those are my two favorite. I snuck two favorites in there. All
I'm
right.
trying to, I mean, that's a very good question, London. I'm trying to think. I mean, there's certain parts of some of the solo stuff I really, really enjoy. And as I'm thinking, some of the stuff that surprised my own thought pattern is I really loved George's Brainwashed album, which came out years after his death.
Mhm.
The song Any Road, I saw him perform that on a YouTube video. I think it was on an MTV show. He just walked in and the producer said that he didn't have a guitar. They handed him a guitar and asked him to play a song. And he played two. He played Any Road and he played All Things Must Pass. He had long hair and a beard. And it was in the mid 90s. And I really enjoyed that album, Devil in the Deep Blue Sky. I'm trying to remember the name of the
Devil
song.
in the Deep Blue Sea. That's actually a remake of a 50s song.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that. Another album I enjoyed, but also brings back some bad memories, was I remember the day I purchased Double Fantasy. And for me, I started listening to Beatles in 73 or 74, but I didn't have the access to the media that we do today. I didn't know that the Rock and Roll album came out the year later. I think it's 75. And for me, the Double Fantasy was the first Lennon album I actually remember anticipating coming out and buying. I remember running home and playing it, and I love just like Starting Over and Clean Up Time and I'm Losing You and all those songs. And unfortunately, when I think of them now, they get associated with the what happened on December 8th of 1980. It's a little bit of melancholy when I listen to that. From McCartney, I always loved the Venus and Mars album.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I purchased that album, sitting at home in my bedroom with the speakers turned up loud, but wearing headphones so I didn't disturb my parents, and just really liking the orchestra theme and listen to what the man said. I remember hearing that on WRKO radio, on the little transistor radio, in the summer of 73 or 74 when they came out. For Ringo, I love the Ringo Rama album. I thought that was fantastic. I thought out of all the post-Ringo albums, the 73 album, I thought that was the best one. I really enjoyed that album. I think one of the songs on it was Elizabeth Rain. It was just a fun album. And the CD I had when I purchased it had a second CD that when you plug it into if you put it in your computer, you could actually, it's a DVD, you could put it into your TV. It shows the making of the album, which was recorded in his home.
I missed that one. Wow. Okay.
I really enjoyed it. And I look at the song list because as I get older, I get more and more confused as to what was on each album. It has the George Harrison tribute, Never Without You. Imagine Me There. I enjoyed both those songs. I think that Before I Am, I was Elizabeth Rains. I was listening to this a few days ago in the car on the iPod, the thing you plug in, the Bluetooth. I really enjoyed it. And he sounds really good on the album. He has some good musicians playing with him. And I was quite impressed, actually. It has the Eric Clapton solo on Never Without You, the George tribute. And the DVD that accompanies it, the making of the album, was actually really nice as well. It showed Eric recording his guitar part at his own home. They sent over the tape and he played to it and sent two different versions and said, pick whichever one you like of the guitar solo. So I had to give a little bit on each one that I enjoyed the most. But for the most part, I enjoy all of them. The tricky thing would maybe sometime, what was our least favorite album? Maybe we can choose it for the next podcast.
Yeah, let's do that next time. That'll be fun. Dave, what about you?
Well, just thinking back, the live album, Wings at the Speed of Sound, right? Was that
Wings Over America?
Oh, Wings Over America. Right. I just confused with your album. I wore that out as a teenager. And it was more so because looking back, McCartney didn't tour for 13, 14 years. So,
Right.
I mean, I was 17 when I first saw him in Worcester. There's my Boston accent, Worcester. But yeah, so I guess you wouldn't count that one, but probably the McCartney album, the first one. I thought that was really well done. And I know it wasn't a critically acclaimed album, but I think more so, the time and the historic aspect of that album, coming out, and it came out, did it end up coming out before Let It Be, or?
It did.
Right. That's the one that came out with a press release that the Beatles had broken up.
Yeah. Yes.
So this, I guess, for Lennon, it would be the Imagine album. Maybe the Plastic Ono Band album. That was certainly, a really good period. It's hard to pick a favorite. I like the stripped down version of Double Fantasy. That was really well done. And the Brainwashed album by George Harrison, that one is probably one of my favorites as well. That was really well done as well. And I think Jeff Lynne and his son, Danny, completed it after he passed.
I read a story where Danny, I think, said, my father completed 90% of every song. He didn't complete each one because he actually didn't want it to release it.
Yeah.
If he had it 90% done, there was no pressure to release but he gave explicit instructions on how to complete it. I think it was Danny that said, it wasn't Jeff Lynne.
Yeah, that's
a fantastic album.
Yeah.
I'd like to mention something. I actually purchased them within the last year or two, but I haven't had time to actually look at them until recently, was George Harrison's Living in the Material World book that was put out by his wife, Olivia. I don't know if you've seen that. It accompanied the film.
Heard about it.
By Scorsese. And Ringo's photograph book. I spent part of the July 4th weekend looking at those two books with the pictures and the stories that accompanied each picture. Phenomenal, because the photos come from the private collections in both books. And what really touched me was a letter in the Living Material World book that John Lennon wrote to George's mom. I think it was in the late 60s or early 1970. And I thought that was very interesting, his Lennon writing a letter to George's mom, and that was put in the book. It said it was given by Yoko. I don't know how she ended up with it again, but it showed pictures of Friar Park prior to George doing the garden over, and the overgrowth of all the weeds and the horrible condition of the home. And Ringo's books had some great photos of Hamburg when he was with Rory, but hanging out with the Beatles, and a lot of tour photographs. If you ever get an opportunity, I highly recommend both of those books. They're just really, really nice, and they show the unique friendship that has existed through all of them, because the books go right up until the present. So there's some great photos of Paul and George in the mid-'80s together. Supposedly when they were having a great feud and not talking, and there they are smiling, and they're looking like they're having a blast together. And at one point, I think, and I forget which, I think it was the Ringo book, that we never really paid attention to media. They told one side of the story, but they weren't with us all the time. And I think that these books really, really show that. And they're just fun. I spent a few hours over the weekend just absorbed in the books, and wish I had more. I'm hoping that there's more that come out like that. And I haven't looked at the Get Back book yet that accompanied that 10-hour film. I have it. I just haven't had an opportunity. Maybe that'll be something I get to do this weekend, because I've really been nostalgic for the Beatles the last few weeks. listening to a lot of music and watching a lot, like Leonard said, the YouTube videos. But if you get a chance, I highly recommend each book for the audience as well. I think you'd be quite impressed.
So until next time, I'm Len.
I'm Dave.
I'm Seth.
And we are
The Beatlemaniacs.